Most people think chess grandmasters are geniuses, freaks of nature, born with brains wired differently. That's what they want you to believe. Magnus Carlsen became a grandmaster at 13. 13. Most kids at 13 are failing algebra. He was defeating world champions. Was he born special? No. His parents just gave him a system. A cognitive system so powerful, it doesn't just make you better at chess. It rewires how your brain processes everything. Every decision, every problem, every situation where pressure is highest and time is shortest. I reverse engineered it. Every interview, every training log, every cognitive science paper behind what grandmasters actually do. It comes down to 4 methods, and by the end of this video, your brain will never think about thinking the same way again. Here's what you think is happening when a grandmaster plays. They're calculating, crunching thousands of moves per second, like a supercomputer running through every possibility. Wrong. Dutch psychologist Adrian de Groot studied this in the 1940s. He showed grandmasters and amateur players the same chess positions for just 5 seconds, then hid the board, asked them to reconstruct it. Grandmasters recalled the positions almost perfectly. Amateurs recalled almost nothing. Same 5 seconds, completely different results. You'd assume grandmasters just have better memory. Wrong again. De Groot scrambled the pieces, put them in positions that would never occur in a real game. Suddenly, grandmasters performed exactly like beginners. Their advantage disappeared completely. They weren't remembering individual pieces. They were remembering patterns, chunks. When a grandmaster looks at a board, they don't see 32 pieces. They see 5 or 6 recognizable structures. Each structure carries a history. Thousands of games processed and compressed into a single instant of recognition. Cognitive scientist Herbert Simon called this chunking. Your working memory is weak. It holds about 7 items at once. That's it. But if you compress those items into meaningful chunks, suddenly 7 slots carry the weight of hundreds. It's not a bigger hard drive. It's better zip compression. This is why experts in every field outperform novices even under time pressure. The surgeon doesn't see 20 separate symptoms. They see one illness script. The chess grandmaster doesn't see 32 pieces. They see 5 patterns. The Navy SEAL doesn't see a complex ambush. They see a classic L-shaped attack formation they've drilled 1,000 times. Average people try to process everything raw. Experts process everything compressed. That's the gap. And it's not talent, it's training. But chunking patterns only works if you have patterns to chunk. That's where most people get stuck. They practice the wrong way for years and wonder why they never improve. Chapter 2 fixes this. Schools punish mistakes. Get it wrong, lose points. Get judged. So you learn to avoid failure at all costs. Play it safe. Stay in your comfort zone. This destroys your ability to ever become elite at anything. Here's what grandmasters actually do. They collect mistakes like trophies. Every grandmaster keeps a defeat database. Every game they've lost, every blunder they've made. They return to these losses obsessively, not to feel bad, to extract the pattern behind the failure, to encode it so deeply it never happens again. Robert Bjork at UCLA calls this desirable difficulty. When learning feels easy, almost nothing is being encoded. When learning involves struggle, retrieval effort, and error correction, the brain treats the information as critical. It flags it, highlights it in neon, locks it into long-term memory. A mistake is not a failure. A mistake is a forced encoding event. Garry Kasparov, world champion for 15 years, said his greatest teacher was his loss to Deep Blue in 1997. He studied that defeat for years, extracted every error, rebuilt his approach from the ground up. His losses made him better than any of his wins ever could. The problem is, this requires a specific kind of practice most people never do. Deliberate practice. Not mindless repetition. Focused, uncomfortable, targeted drilling of your weakest points. Anders Ericsson at Florida State University spent his entire career studying expert performance. His conclusion was brutal and clear. It's not hours that create mastery. It's the right kind of hours. 10,000 hours of the wrong practice produces 10,000 hours of mediocrity. Comfortable practice is a waste of time. Your brain only upgrades when it's under pressure to upgrade. Most people practice what they're already good at. It feels productive. It feels satisfying. They're lying to themselves. Experts practice what they're terrible at. It feels awful. It feels like failure. That's exactly why it works. Every chess grandmaster drills their weakest openings, their worst endgame scenarios, the exact positions where they've lost before. They build a failure library, and they train inside it until failure becomes fluency. Hit subscribe before you forget. Most people won't implement it. That's your advantage. One chapter left. But here's the problem, though. Even if you collect failures and drill your weaknesses, your brain still has a ceiling, a processing speed limit. To break through it, you need Chapter 3. Here's something strange. Chess grandmasters who've competed at the highest levels for decades still train with the clock running, always. Even in practice. Even when the result doesn't matter. Even when they're working on pure analysis. Why? Because the brain that performs under pressure is a different brain than the brain that thinks comfortably. This isn't metaphorical. It's neurological. Under pressure, your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for long-term planning and rational analysis, starts to compete with your amygdala, which is screaming danger signals. Cortisol floods your system. Your thinking narrows. Your pattern recognition degrades. You forget things you know cold. Unless you've trained under pressure so often that pressure itself becomes a pattern your brain recognizes and ignores. Military training works on this principle. SAIL candidates don't practice shooting in comfortable conditions and then get sent into combat. They train under exhaustion, under chaos, under cold water and sleep deprivation, until the skill is encoded so deep that stress becomes irrelevant noise. Grandmasters do the same thing cognitively. They play rapid chess, blitz chess, bullet chess. 1 minute per side, 30 seconds, 10 seconds. The decisions that would normally take 10 minutes of analysis have to happen in 2 seconds. Under that kind of pressure, the conscious, analytical mind shuts off. Pattern recognition takes over completely. And here's the beautiful paradox. The more you train under artificial pressure, the better you perform under real pressure. Because your brain learns that pressure is just another variable, not a threat, just information. Your version of this is simple. Whatever you're learning, add a time constraint. Give yourself half the time you think you need. Do practice tests before you're ready. Simulate the pressure of the real situation in training, so the real situation feels like practice. Researchers at the University of Chicago found that students who were told their test scores would be publicly shared performed significantly worse than students who just took the test normally. Social pressure degraded performance, unless those students had previously trained with public stakes. Then the public pressure became a trigger for sharper focus instead. Train under pressure, perform under pressure. Always. But there's still one final problem. Even with patterns, even with deliberate failure, even with pressure training, most people still think reactively. They respond to situations. They don't control them. Chapter 4 is what separates grandmasters from every other level of player. It's also what separates elite performers in every field from everyone else. Most people think forward. What should I do next? What's my next move? What do I want to happen? Average thinking. Reactive thinking, the kind of thinking that makes you permanently one step behind. Grandmasters think backward. They start with the outcome they want, a forced checkmate, a winning endgame position, a completely dominant board structure. Then they work backwards from that outcome to the present moment. Every move is evaluated not by what it gains right now, but by whether it progresses toward the target outcome. This is called retrograde analysis. And it changes everything. Charlie Munger, vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, applied this to investing. He called it inversion. Don't just ask what would make this succeed. Ask what would definitely make this fail. Then avoid those things systematically. He built one of the greatest investment records in history, partly by thinking backward through every decision. Jeff Bezos does this with a technique he calls the regret minimization framework. He asks himself which decision he'll regret more at age 80. He projects forward to the outcome, then reverses backward to the choice. The outcome determines the present decision, not the other way around. This isn't just philosophy. It changes how your brain processes information at a structural level. Psychologist Gary Klein studied expert decision-making under pressure for decades. His conclusion was that true experts don't evaluate multiple options and compare them. They recognize the situation as a pattern, run a quick mental simulation of the most likely successful outcome, and then check backwards through their decision chain to verify it holds. Pattern recognition plus backward simulation. Done in seconds. Average people deliberate forward endlessly. Experts simulate backwards rapidly. That's why experts feel faster. They're not skipping steps. They're running the steps in the right direction. Your practice protocol for this is straightforward. Start every study session or practice session by defining the end state first. What does mastery of this look like? What does a perfect performance look like? What does complete understanding look like? Write it down. Then work not forward from where you are. By the way, I've compiled all 4 of these methods: chunking patterns, the failure library, pressure simulation, and reverse thinking, into a 1-page cognitive training protocol you can print and run immediately. Link in the description. Free. Here's the real takeaway. Chess, they run a better cognitive operating system. They compress information into patterns. They train inside their failures. They simulate pressure until pressure becomes irrelevant. And they always think backward from the outcome they want. This isn't about chess. This is about how your brain processes every problem, every decision, every challenge in your life. The Grandmasters system works everywhere. Job interviews, business strategy, complex negotiations, technical skill development. Any situation where you need to think faster, decide better, and perform under pressure. Most people will watch this video and do nothing. They'll go back to passive rereading, comfortable practice, forward-only thinking, and then wonder why they never break through. You won't do that. You just built the operating system. Now you need to install it. But here's the problem, though. Even with the best cognitive system in the world, if you can't sustain focus long enough to actually use it, none of this matters. Most people can't focus for more than 4 minutes before their brain starts screaming for a distraction. That's why I made this video, breaking down exactly how to rebuild your attention span from the ground up. The same method prisoners, elite athletes, and special forces operators use to enter deep focus on command. Watch it next.